I was having dinner alone when the phone rang. My son's name, Evan, lit up on the screen. He didn't usually call in the evening, especially not on my birthday. I answered, trying to lift my voice a little. Hello, son? Dad. Evan's voice was cheerful, winded through speakerphone like a breeze. We're in Napa Valley. Just finished a wine tasting. Tired, but fun. Sounds great, I said, leaning back into the wooden chair, the one Lorraine, my wife, used to call the throne of a stubborn old man. Happy birthday, Dad. I'll call again soon. We're heading to dinner with Chloe's family. Stay healthy, okay? Thanks, son. I smiled even though my dinner had just been a slice of leftover ham and some canned beans. Enjoy yourselves. Evan hung up. I placed the phone down on the table, reached for my cooling cup of mint tea, but before my fingers touched the ceramic, I heard rustling from the phone. I looked down at the screen. The call was still active. He won't argue, Evan said, clearer now, as if the phone was resting loosely in his coat pocket. Then Chloe's voice came through, crisp even, confident like metal brushing glass. That house already belongs to you. I thought your dad had a will. Not yet, but he doesn't need one. As long as he ends up in a care facility, we can sell it immediately. No complicated paperwork. I couldn't breathe. The kitchen was as silent as a chapel. We need the down payment for the apartment in Bellevue. I talked to the agent. If we wanted to secure it, we have to act this month. I know, Evan replied, and I think it's time. He forgets things, doesn't walk steadily anymore. What if he falls? It's dangerous. It's embarrassing. Best to move him into a care home. Call it a resort with nurses on call 24/7. You don't have to explain much. Just say it's for safety. Crack. The teacup slipped from my hand, breaking into 3 pieces. The tea seeped through the tile joints Lorraine had once picked, forming a dark stain. I sat still. I didn't pick up the shards. I didn't wipe the spill. I just stared at the phone. Still lit, still open, still broadcasting every word from the people I loved most. I don't want to wait like we did with your grandfather, Chloe said, waiting until everything falls apart. Don't make it messy. Make it clean, efficient. Yeah, I'll talk to him next week. A pause. He might even be grateful. The call ended. Before continuing, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. I stayed seated, my fingers gripping the chair's edge, eyes fixed on the pale gray wall Lorraine had painted herself one summer years ago. 30 years. 30 years of pouring concrete, laying the foundation, installing floorboards, placing each brick with my own 2 hands. And now, my son was making plans to remove me, quietly calculating the market value of the very home his mother and I had spent our lives building. And for the first time in many years, I felt the breeze through the window no longer cool. It was sharp like metal and cold like the truth. I don't remember how long I sat in that kitchen after the call ended. I just know that by the time I bent down to pick up the broken pieces of the cup, the cold from the floor tiles had started to seep through my knees. They were terracotta porcelain tiles, the kind Lorraine loved. She chose that color because she said it was warm, like southern Italy in the fall. I once joked that we hadn't even left Spokane, let alone set foot in Italy, but still I drove 2 hours to a supply store in Idaho just to find enough of those tiles. Back then, Lorraine had walked out to the back porch with a glass of lemonade. It was a June afternoon. She placed the glass beside me, wiped sweat from my forehead with the sleeve of her old shirt, then sat down next to the bucket of cement. Your hands are shaking, she said, her voice both soft and firm. Drink this. Rest a little. I don't remember how many glasses of lemonade I drank that summer. All I remember is each glass had a thin slice of lemon cut with a serrated knife and a sprig of mint she grew in the planter by the front steps. We didn't have much money then, but Lorraine always found ways to make things feel special. Even lemonade. We didn't buy that house. We built it from nothing. Every nail, every wooden board carried the mark of sweat. It took 19 months to finish, not counting the backyard and the porch. It wasn't just a house, it was a life we tried to build, so Evan could grow up having everything we didn't. When Evan turned 18, he got an acceptance letter from the University of Oregon. Lorraine jumped like a child when she heard the news. I stood there, quiet, proud, yes, happy, yes, But beneath all that was a web of worry: tuition, housing, living expenses. I remember flipping through our budget notebook in the middle of the night, red marks filling the margins. "I can pick up more shifts at the library," Lorraine said, placing her hand on my shoulder. "And you could—" "I'll figure it out," I interrupted softly. "He deserves it." And I did figure it out. I picked up night shifts at the machine shop. That winter, there were weeks that I worked 72 hours. One time, my car broke down on I-90 while I was driving Evan's lease paperwork to him. I sat in the freezing cold for 3 hours, the folder by my side holding his first rental contract. All I could think was, if I'm late, he has no place to sleep tonight. So I didn't take my eyes off the clock, waiting for the tow truck, quietly whispering the bank account number that barely had $150 left. I did everything I could so that boy would never feel the kind of lack I once did. I knew that was something my own father never did for me. Then Evan graduated. 3 months in, he lost his job because of layoffs. The next 8 months dragged on with nothing. He moved into a shabby apartment in South Seattle. Chloe had just started dating him around then. I didn't think she was a bad person, but I felt the hesitation in her eyes the moment she called me Mr. Milton instead of Dad. Evan didn't ask for money, but I knew. I saw the mounting credit card bills. I knew the apartment was close to eviction. I knew his car had failed the second inspection. So I wired him money every month, like clockwork, never asking for thanks. I didn't need his gratitude. I just wanted him to stay on his feet. I even bought him an old Ford Focus. The car needed almost $2,000 for a new transmission, but I told him it only cost a few hundred. Old car, but solid. It'll get you around. That's all I said. He hugged me and said, "I'll pay you back, Dad." I believed him. Then Lorraine got sick. Stage 3 breast cancer. She found out late because she kept working, kept holding the house together, didn't want me to see her tired. When the chemo started, I quit my job to stay home full time. Evan called and said he'd try to visit. But that trip, something came up at his new job. So it was just me and Lorraine in that hospital room that winter. I sat beside her the day she passed. The room was bathed in soft yellow light, the window silled tight against the snowstorm. She placed her hand in mine, weak as a thread. "You have to keep the house," she whispered. "For Evan. It's the only thing we have left to give him." I nodded, eyes blurred. I promised. And I kept that promise. Through the long winter, the fallen autumn leaves, the property tax notices, the Thanksgivings when Evan didn't come because the flights were full or the company had a year-end campaign. I patched leaks, replaced the heater, reseeded the front lawn. I rebuilt the back fence after a storm. I kept Lorraine's room untouched, even the teacup on her nightstand. Though the water inside had long since evaporated, I didn't change the curtains. The terrace didn't clear out her coats in the closet, and every morning I brewed coffee in the exact cup she used. I used to think, maybe someday Evan would bring his kids home. Maybe laughter would echo again on that porch where I once carved EM plus AM equals home with a hammer and nail. I never thought of Ibrahimo that he would be the first one to try and push me out of it. I started to notice the changes in Evan clearly about 2 years after he moved to Seattle. When he was still in school, he used to call home a few times each month. When he first began working, he still sent birthday gifts, still messaged me reminders to eat regularly, still carried that eager tone when talking about his first projects. But then, things began to shift, slowly, like how an old layer of paint fades through rainy seasons. He still called, but less and less. His messages turned brief, distant, sometimes no more than an emoji in place of actual words. The first time I saw myself called old man was in an email about Thanksgiving flights. "Hey, old man, we probably won't make it home this year. Swamped with a new project at work. I'll send pics of our Colorado trip last week. You'd love the place. Super chill. Old man, not dad. Not pops like he used to say when he was a boy." I tried not to take it personally. Tried to believe young people had their own ways of saying things. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just about names. It was about space. It was about edges being redrawn. Chloe became more present after that. In the beginning, Evan's messages would still include something like, "Chloe says to ask if you prefer red or white wine, so we can send some." But over time, it turned into, Chloe thinks you should drink less wine. At your age, maybe switch to herbs. She always seemed to have some thought, some suggestion, some correction about how I lived, about my house, my diet, the way I moved, the way I handled things. I didn't hate Chloe, but there are people you meet only once and you know then they don't believe you belong in the same world. Chloe was that kind, the kind who took pictures of food before eating, who once said Spokane was a fairy tale town no one wanted to revisit, who always used the word efficiency instead of love. The last time they visited, about a year ago, I took them to the diner Lorraine used to love, the one with smoked bacon sandwiches and spicy onion soup. While I was sharing a story about the first time Lorraine brought me there, Chloe cut in, smiling softly. Actually, I think places like this should be archived into pre-internet culture, the kind of restaurant supporting characters go to in old movies. I paused mid-sentence, my spoon halfway to my mouth. Evan said nothing, just glanced at me, then shifted the subject. That evening, I opened my computer and saw an email from Evan. The subject line read, "Some thoughts on future planning." I opened it. In the message, Evan wrote, "Hey, old man, Chloe and I have talked this through. We want to make sure you get the best possible care in the years ahead. If you need more frequent support, we've looked into some great facilities near Bellevue. That's where we'll be moving after the wedding. Attached are a few brochures for you to review. Don't let pride get in the way of staying safe, okay?" Underneath were 4 attachments: sunsetseniorliving.pdf, Harmony Meadows Tour Schedule.pdf, Cost Comparison Sheet.xlsx, and Top 10 Tips to Help Parents Transition Smoothly.pdf. I don't know how long sat staring at that screen. I just remember that as the light from it hit my face, the room around me began to feel unfamiliar. I used to think this house was Evan's fallback place, that if everything out there collapsed, he could still come home, knock on the door, and be welcomed in. I used to think he understood that, but now I saw clearly. They were preparing to turn me into part of a logistical plan. Labeled reasonable, convenient, safe, I didn't reply to the email. A week later, a card arrived in the mail, a wedding photo of Evan and Chloe taken in Seattle's Central Park. On the card was a line printed in elegant script: "We are building a new home, but we'll never forget our first. Dad's house." On the back was a floor plan of a 2-bedroom apartment in Bellevue. One room was marked in yellow. For Dad. No question, no invitation, just notice. I folded the card gently, not angry, just deliberate. I placed it inside the drawer where I used to keep Lorraine's birthday cards. I'm no longer young, but I haven't forgotten. I remember every brick, every crack I patched in this house. I remember Lorraine patting my back when I coughed from cement dust. I remember the light in her eyes whenever Evan brought home a test with an A. And now I remember exactly what it feels like to be positioned as the aging burden inside someone else's perfectly streamlined life plan. A part to be removed respectfully, like a sofa that no longer fits the decor. Only I've never been the kind of man who sits still waiting to be carried out. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because of my back pain, not because of the wind slamming the windows like every other winter before. I sat upright in the armchair, the one Lorraine used to sit in to knit scarves and watch afternoon cooking shows, while I would make her tea. The light in the room was dim and golden, casting a soft glow on the silver frame sitting on the small table beside the chair. The photo of Lorraine smiling gently, like she was still alive, like she was still waiting for me to tell her about my day. Looking into her eyes, I felt something slipping away from me. Not anger, not quite. What pressed down on my chest that night wasn't rage. It was an emptiness, the kind that comes when you wake up from a long dream and finally realize everything you gave has been taken for granted. I stood up, walked slowly into the study, and opened the 3rd drawer on the left, where I kept things I didn't want anyone else to touch. Inside was a small wooden box Lorraine used to store wedding invitations, hospital receipts, and a few handwritten letters. One of them was what I came for. I opened the envelope. The paper had yellowed into an old cream tone. Lorraine's handwriting slanted gently, steady, the ink smudged in places like it had just been written in the rain. "Arthur, if someday I'm no longer here, remember one thing. Never let our child forget what his parents gave. Love doesn't mean staying silent forever, and kindness doesn't mean you have to endure endlessly. People forget, especially when life gets too easy. I don't want Evan to become one of them. I know you're gentle. I know you always give in. But sometimes the kindest thing we can do for our children is to let them learn responsibility on their own. If one day you find yourself treated like an obligation, stop and make them remember. I read that paragraph at least 3 times. Every word began to speak louder, like her voice rising from somewhere far away, strong enough to cut through the walls Evan and Chloe had built between me and the house I made. I pulled the chair to the desk, took out the brown notebook I always used to write grocery lists and daily notes. For the first time in months, I opened to a blank page. I began to write. Tuesday, the 12th of November. Maybe I've been too soft, too trusting, so much so that they forgot who I am. They forgot that the man who paid for every tuition bill, every used car fix wasn't a stranger. He was a father, a husband. Chloe never saw that. And Evan, maybe he didn't want to anymore. I put the pen down and looked around the room. The wooden wall had a small patch of peeling paint by the window, something I hadn't gotten around to fixing since last spring. The wall clock had been off by 1 minute for several weeks, I knew, but didn't bother correcting it. Those little things, I used to tend to them like a garden. Now I felt like I was living in a garden no one wanted to see anymore, just waiting to be cleared out, to be listed. I opened the drawer beneath the desk and pulled out the photo album Lorraine had crafted by hand. The first page was a picture of the 3 of us standing in front of the house. Evan was in 8th grade. It was our first time using a digital camera. My beard was patchy, my shirt stained with paint. Lorraine wore a hand-knit wool hat. Evan held up 2 fingers in a peace sign, grinning wide. Page 3 showed Lorraine during her illness, hair almost entirely gone, but still smiling as I pushed her wheelchair through the fall garden. Evan wasn't in that photo. I placed my hand gently on the album cover. Then I looked up and stared at my wife's portrait. "I'm sorry, Lorraine," I whispered. I kept my promise. But maybe it wasn't enough. And for the first time, I didn't just think about protecting this house. I thought about preserving myself in the story. I didn't want to become the quiet ending in someone else's life. I didn't want Evan to remember me as the agreeable father, the silent father, the one who stepped aside because it was more convenient for their plan. I wanted him to know that I still remember, that I haven't lost my mind, and that I also know how to say enough without ever raising my voice. I didn't call Evan. I didn't reply to the email with the assisted living brochures. I didn't ask about the Bellevue apartment. I didn't respond to the weekly Sunday message that came exactly at 10 a.m., like clockwork, never once accompanied by a real phone call. Instead, on Monday morning, I called Mr. Dorsey. Lorraine's lawyer, the one who had helped us file hospital paperwork and draft the will nearly 10 years ago. His office was still on the corner of Maple and Jefferson, just above the old bookstore Lorraine used to visit. His voice over the phone sounded older than I remembered, but still clear, steady. "Arthur," he said after a short pause of recognition. "Been a long time. How are you?" "I need to see you," I replied. "About the house, about Evan, about stepping away." He paused, then said, "Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. Bring the deed if you still have it, and any documents related to the property." I arrived 10 minutes early. Spokane was overcast. The air still held the dampness of last night's rain. I carried an old leather briefcase filled with house records, bank documents, and Lorraine's handwritten letter. Not to present anything, but to remind myself I wasn't here out of anger. I was here for a promise. Dorsey was still the same man with a pale striped tie, an office full of books, and a coffee machine whirring in the corner. "Who are you planning to transfer the house to?" he asked, scanning the documents. "I want to sell," I said, looking straight at him. "Not rent, not hold on to it. I want to walk away clean, leave nothing behind for them but a lesson." "Evan will—" "I kept my promise to my wife," I said, placing Lorraine's letter on the desk. "Now I'm keeping the promise to myself." He nodded, quietly. No more questions. 3 days later, the house was listed through a real estate agent Dorsey trusted. Within 2 days, a Canadian couple looking for a vacation home in the Northwest sent in an offer. Full cash, no negotiation. Newlyweds working remote in tech, searching for a place with soul, not concrete like the city. I think Lorraine would have liked that. While the paperwork moved forward, I drove to the locksmith at the end of Garland Road. The man, Luis, looked at me through thick glasses and gave a gentle smile. Replacing everything. Front door, back door, garage too, I said, and I need 3 extra copies. For what reason, he asked. Not out of curiosity, just part of the form. Because this house is no longer something I need to secure for others, I said. It's something I need to keep safe from those who no longer deserve it. I also bought a small surveillance camera, the kind disguised as an outlet plug, sending live feed to a phone. I didn't plan on calling the police. I just wanted to see Evan's face when he returned, tried the door, and realized the keys no longer fit. That evening, I began packing. Not like someone moving out, like someone curating a museum of memory, choosing one item at a time. The wedding album, the clock Lorraine gave me for our 20th anniversary, her handwritten recipe book, filled with notes along the margins, an unfinished knitted scarf. I left all the furniture behind. Not out of generosity, but because none of it held any value to me once someone had attached a price tag to it. I took one large suitcase and a small fabric bag. After wrapping each item, I'd pause, place it on the table, look at it for a moment, then tuck it away. Upstairs, I opened the drawer of Lorraine's bedside table. The small velvet box was still there. I opened it. Her wedding ring, the one I hadn't touched since the burial. The bedroom light caught the round stone, sparkling like it did the night I slipped it on her finger under the porch roof of our first house. I lifted the ring, kissed the stone gently. And for the first time since the funeral, I said it out loud. I'm leaving now, my love. Then I placed the ring in the inner pocket of my bag, next to a small framed wedding photo, wrapped carefully in one of her handkerchiefs. The email arrived on Wednesday morning. Subject line, a practical idea for the near future. Sender, Evan Milton. I skimmed it once, just enough to see how he sidestepped the truth with polished language that sounded more like a memo from a financial consultant than a message from the son I had raised through long shifts in a machine shop full of steel dust. Hey, old man, I think it's time that we sit down and talk about managing the house. With the current real estate market and the fact that you're needing more proper rest, I believe we can find a reasonable way to transfer the property within the family. Chloe's really excited about the idea of refreshing the house for the next generation. Of course, we wouldn't change anything without your permission. It's just, if everything's ready, why let it sit idle? I closed the email. I didn't reply. 3 days later, a sea green wedding invitation arrived in the mail. Smooth paper, silver edges, a photo of Evan and Chloe standing by a lakeshore, holding hands, sunlight soft through their hair. Below the cursive lettering was the message, Dearest Arthur, we hope you can arrive in Seattle a little early before the wedding so we can enjoy a quiet dinner, make plans to share our living space, and begin a new chapter as a close-knit family. I read every word again. On the back, Chloe had added a handwritten note. Everything in Bellevue is ready for you. We've reserved a service department just 5 minutes walk from us. It has full-time nurses and morning yoga classes. You'll love it. I set the card down on the table, picked up a pair of scissors, and cut it in half. I wasn't angry. I just wanted things to be unmistakably clear. I didn't send back a rejection, didn't text, didn't call. I crossed Evan's name out of my phone, took his picture out of the frame Lorraine had placed on the bookshelf, the one with all 3 of us from back when none of this had started to fray. That afternoon, I went to Washington Trust Bank, the small branch at the end of Rosewood Avenue, right on the corner with the street lined by maple trees, glowing red each fall. The bank officer, Lisa, was around 30, with a gentle voice and eyes that didn't probe. I'd like to open a personal account, I said. No joint names, no authorized users, just me. Fine. We have priority packages for large transfers, she offered. Is there anything else you need? I want the entire sum from the house sale moved from my current bank to here. This week. We'll track the process for you, and if you prefer, we can restrict access to any third-party inquiries. That's what I want, I said. No one, not even relatives, should be automatically informed I have an account here. Understood, Mr. Milton. She handed me a form to sign. I signed with the firmest stroke I'd made in years. 3 days later, nearly $890,000 appeared in my Washington Trust account. No one but me knew the password. No one but me had access. Not Evan, not Chloe, not a single person who once thought they could manage my life on my behalf. That evening, I walked around Lake Chelan, where I had quietly rented a small apartment in a retirement community a week earlier. Cabin lights from across the lake shimmered over the water like sunken stars. I wore the coat Lorraine had sewn for me in the winter of 2008. In the pocket was the key to my new home, and a folded slip of paper with something I had written down just hours before. They thought I was easy to arrange because I had stayed quiet. But from that silence, I learned how to vanish without noise. And when you stay gone long enough, people begin to notice your absence more than anything you ever said. Friday afternoon. The sky over Spokane was clear, sunlight soft, the kind of weather that makes people believe everything will go according to plan. A black SUV pulled up to my porch, or more precisely, the house they once assumed would be theirs. Evan stepped out first, wearing dark sunglasses, a charcoal polo shirt, holding a coffee from some roadside shop. Chloe followed, light linen dress, hair tied up, carrying a tote bag with the logo Bridal & Co. They both walked up the steps like people arriving to claim what was owed. Chloe rang the bell. No answer. She pressed again, longer. Strange, she turned to Evan. He's not answering. Evan reached into his pocket, pulled out the familiar key ring, and slid one into the front door lock. It didn't go in. He tried pushing harder, but his hand froze. Too stiff. Chloe leaned in. No, something's wrong. Evan frowned. Looks like a new lock. He stepped back, examining the hardware. The old brass lock was now replaced by a matte silver one. Clean, untouched. Garage. Chloe glanced around. They circled to the side of the house, tried the back door. Still locked. Evan rummaged through his jacket pocket, pulled out the garage remote. Pressed once. A red blink. Nothing moved. What the hell is going on? Maybe... He changed the locks. Evan said it aloud, but it sounded more like a question. There's no reason to do that. Didn't he say he'd be here waiting? Chloe was clearly irritated. Call him. Evan pulled out his phone, scrolled through his contacts, hit dial. From the other end, an automated voice. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. He tried again. This time the phone read disconnected. That can't be. Chloe crossed her arms, voice sharp as a blade. You think he's losing it? Evan shook his head, but the doubt was already there. No. No way. They returned to the front door. Chloe rang again. No movement. No lights flicking on. No shadows behind the frosted glass. Evan tried the key one last time. Still no match. He dug through his jeans, his coat pocket, his wallet. Every key useless. Take me home, Chloe sighed, her tone flat with distaste. We're standing here like burglars. Evan said nothing. His hand rested on the doorknob. Then he saw the note. Folded, taped right at eye level, Wayne. Not big, not flashy, but precisely placed. He peeled it off, opened it, read. My handwriting. Blue ink. Steady, not a tremor. Evan, this house is not yours. It never was. It is your mother's dream, your father's labor. It is every night we painted the walls, every winter I patched the roof, every summer your mother planted lilies out front. You took your first steps on this wooden floor. You napped on the armchair where she knit your blankets. But none of that gives you the right to decide the fate of this house, especially when your plan was to relocate your father like an old item needing tidy storage. I am not weak, I was just quiet, and now I have chosen to end the silence. This house has been sold. The money is in my private account. No one, not even you, can touch it. All your belongings have been moved to a storage unit. The details are in your old email if you still remember the password. I hope when you read this you understand one thing. Kindness is not an obligation, and a father's love does not equal indulgence. Live in a way that one day, if you have children, you will not be called a financial burden in their plans. Arthur. Evan froze. Chloe snatched the letter from his hand, read it quickly, her eyes wide. When she reached the line about the money, her lips tightened. Are you kidding? Hey, she wasn't really asking Evan. He sold the house. Evan nodded. slowly, like someone finally understanding the weight of the fall. Chloe pulled out her phone. I'm calling the agent. This has to be a mistake. The line rang. Her voice faltered. Hi, Dan. It's Chloe, Evan Milton's fiancée. About the house on Maple. It's still listed, right? A pause. Already sold. Finalized. When? Her face paled. No, we weren't notified. No, we didn't know. Okay, thank you. She hung up. Didn't look at Evan. 3 weeks ago. Direct sale. Cash. No involvement from our end. Evan backed away from the door, collapsed onto the steps, hands over his head. He can't do this to me, he shouted, voice cracking. I'm his son. I have rights. I'm the heir. Maybe, Chloe said coolly, he just told you otherwise. She stood, brushed her dress, walked down the steps without looking back. I'll call an Uber. Handle yourself. Chloe Bushday, Evan called out, but she didn't turn. He sat there alone. The evening sun softened. The house behind him now belonged to someone else. In his pocket, the old keys rattled, useless. And in his hands, a letter. Every word a full stop to the inheritance he thought was guaranteed. Behind the door, a camera still recorded. Not broadcast, not leaked, just archived. A clean cut between what used to be family and what is now only assumption. I don't know exactly what happened after that Friday afternoon, but I can guess. With the precision of a father who once watched his son bury his face in his arms over a failed math problem, or sit in silence after the first job interview that didn't lead anywhere. A week later, I received an email from Evan. Subject line, I'm sorry. Time, 3:17 a.m. I didn't open it right away. I sat there just looking at the screen. The light from the lakeside apartment flickered against the white wall. I could hear the wind brushing the glass, and nothing else. Eventually, I clicked. Dad, I don't know where to begin. I was wrong, very wrong. I took everything you did for granted, as if you'd always be there, always opening the door, always reaching out. I thought the house was mine because I grew up in it, but I forgot that I wasn't the one who built it. Chloe is gone. She said I lacked a plan, lacked resolve. Maybe she was right. She also knew I had lost my job last month, but didn't say anything. Not until last week, when we stood in front of the locked door. I tried to get a loan to rent back the old apartment in Bellevue. Denied. My credit history is still a mess. I reached out to the real estate agent, asked if there was any way to contact you. They said only your lawyer had the new address. I'm not writing to take anything back. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I know I lost your trust, and I understand if you don't want to respond. But if you're reading this, please know, I finally see it now. Evan, I read it again. Slower, word by word. Then I closed the email. I didn't reply, not out of resentment, but because some apologies only matter when someone is willing to sit through the consequences they caused. I don't know if Evan has reached that point yet, but I do know if I replied now, he would believe again that everything could go back to how it was, with a few words and some late tears. And I've come too far to return to being the man who waited on the porch. I later heard from Dorsey, he still calls now and then to wrap up a few legal details, that Chloe had dropped off the engagement ring in Evan's mailbox after moving out of the Bellevue apartment. I think, Dorsey said over the phone, that was probably the second blow after the house. Seems like she couldn't marry a man who had nothing left to inherit. I didn't say anything. I just gave a faint smile, picked up the ceramic tea mug from the table, and brought it close enough for the steam to warm the tip of my nose in the cold autumn morning. I could picture Evan folding clothes in silence. The old Navy suitcase he once used to visit me now pulled out in the middle of the night in an apartment that no longer echoed with a second voice. I didn't feel relieved. I didn't feel victorious. I only felt a kind of stillness, like the lake outside my window, rippling without a scream, reflecting the sky without holding on to anything. No one knows where I am now. Not Evan, not Chloe, not the old neighbors. I changed my address, closed my accounts, and for the first time in 64 years of living for everyone else, I live without needing to be recognized by anyone. I don't need forgiveness. I don't need apologies written after everything has been lost. I only need one thing. Silence. Long enough for someone to finally hear themselves. Mornings in Shellen always began with an unhurried light. It didn't pour into the room the way it did in Spokane, where harsh sunlight often slashed through the curtains like it had something to prove, but crept in gently, the way Lorraine used to place her hand on my forehead when I was sick. So soft that if I hadn't woken to the birds outside, I might have thought I was still dreaming. My new house was much smaller than the old wooden one in Spokane, but it leaned into the hillside and faced the lake directly. I didn't choose it for the view. I chose it for the silence. No one called my name here. No one asked Dad, "Can you help with this? Do you still have that? What are you planning to do with this?" There was no one. And I was grateful for that. I started a small garden behind the house. Cherry tomatoes, cucumbers, herbs. Not much, just enough for one person. My hands still remembered the shovel and hoe, the veins still raised from the years of laying the first foundations with Lorraine. I remember clearly the moment she walked over with a glass of lemonade as I stacked bricks, saying if I were the contractor, we wouldn't be done until next year. I laughed, wiped my sweat, and she stood still, taking a photo. That photo now sits on the wooden shelf in the living room. Beside it, a small box holding all of Lorraine's handwritten letters. I reread them, one by one, every Saturday night, like a ritual. Some I knew by heart, but still opened, smoothing each fold gently. There is one letter I always keep in the drawer next to her wedding ring. Arthur, if one day I'm no longer by your side, live long enough to teach Evan what true abundance means. Not material things, but the value of where you come from. Don't let our child forget the cost his parents paid. Don't let anyone convince you that giving is an obligation. Because to someone who knows how to receive, it is a gift. I love you, Lorraine. I folded the letter and placed it on the wooden table out on the porch. The sun was rising. The green tea still steamed in my left hand, while my right rested on the wedding ring, as if she were still sitting beside me, on the wooden bench I had rebuilt from old factory planks. After a few weeks settling in, I enrolled in an art class for seniors at the community center. I wasn't good at painting. My hand trembled whenever I tried a long stroke, but I liked how the brush carried me out of my usual thoughts. One time, the teacher asked what I planned to paint for my first piece. I said I wanted to paint a house that no longer existed. I painted the porch where Lorraine once grew wild daisies, the wooden swing I hung for Evan when he was 3, and the door that was always open during the holidays. Not to recreate, but to release. I also began writing, not to publish, just to preserve. I wrote about the years with Lorraine, from the first time I met her at the autumn fair in 1978, to the days she secretly tucked extra cookies into my lunchbox when I worked at the paper mill. I wrote to remember who I was, before I became the father my son called a burden. Every day I wrote a little, sometimes just a few lines, sometimes an entire page. I didn't edit, didn't polish. I wanted every memory to remain raw, alive, and real, the way life was when Lorraine and I walked through it together. I never replied to Evan. I don't plan to. Some conversations are not meant to continue. Some lessons are only learned through absence. I don't know how Evan is doing now, but I believe if he truly wants to understand who his father was, what the house once meant, and why not everything passed down is meant to be inherited, those truths will come to him on a quiet enough day. I took the last sip of tea, looking down at Lake Chelan, still as glass. My reflection was blurred, mingled with sky. I was no longer the man pushed out of the holiday table, no longer the old man waiting for an invitation home. I was the one who chose where to stand. I closed the journal, tucked Lorraine's letter between the pages. The wind swept across the porch, carrying the scent of mint from the little garden behind the house. I placed my hand over the wedding ring and closed my eyes. I kept my promise, Lorraine, and this time I kept it for myself.